get your pen and paper ready, and because today's topic is one that is very relevant, that is very real, and it's going to hit home in many places. And I want you to be able to interact. Apart from learning and understanding how to deal and how to cope with the issues that we're dealing with in terms of domestic violence and abuse, we really need to know how to deal and to cope. So write down your questions if you may have any questions. I want you to interact as well and be part of it, because that's how we grow and that's how we learn. This lady is a tower of strength. She is brilliant, she's kind, she's courteous, she's humble, she's down to earth, and she has really been shaping and helping thousands of people find themselves and healing family units and saving marriages and doing a lot of counseling. She is a counselor. Jes Sirju also is the managing director of JDS Consulting and Counseling Services. She specializes in family, in marriage, in psychological issues. She is the executive director and founder of Care to Speak Foundation, a lecturer in counseling when it comes to abuse and neglect and stress and so many other social issues that we all face. And so she is going to do what she does best, and that is really reaching out. My dear friend, a warm welcome.
Thank you for having me. It is such a pleasure being here once again. I missed you actually, because we haven't seen each other for quite some time.
Yeah.
And then of course COVID kept us away.
Exactly.
So we did our virtual hugs.
We did, huh?
So, but it's really a pleasure, and it's really my honor and privilege to be here with you.
Jes, you've also been a strength for me in many ways during my challenges and my trying times. And I really do appreciate you.
I am very happy.
So I know the power and the knowledge that you have, and I know what you can do in terms of transforming.
I thank you.
Now, currently, you're working on something that is dynamic.
Yes,
that's
is.
life-changing in terms of educating and empowering. And that is, you are working on a documentary on domestic violence.
Yes.
Talk to us about that.
Well, I'm assisting, right? Because all kudos go to the filmmaker. I want to give him his proper acknowledgement. He's Nigerian. With heritage both in Nigeria and Trinidad. His father is Nigerian, his mother is Trinidadian. We joke a lot because I always have a problem pronouncing his name.
Yeah.
But I will try my best this morning. I know he's looking, so I apologize in advance if I don't say it correctly. It's Oyeteo Raymond Ojo Adi, and he's filmmaker. His production company is LRS Production, and he's been behind the scenes way too long in terms of providing us with snippets and documentaries on behind closed doors,
right.
What happens behind closed doors. Mm-hmm. His documentary this time around is going to be based on domestic violence, a male perspective.
A male perspective?
Yes.
That's interesting.
So, we hear about domestic violence in terms of the woman and how many women are abused in the marriages, but we don't hear regularly about males. And of course we understand the stigma. We understand all that goes on with the male ego.
Correct.
But I have been very blessed, very privileged to be alongside him in many of his interviews, in many of these encounters, and in many of those sharing initiatives with persons who have been abused in some form or fashion in marriages or in their families. So coming out of that,
yeah.
Because under Care to Speak, I would have dealt with societal ills of children, right. And the psychological issues that they are faced with, bullying, school violence, rape, incest, and those things.
And we spoke about that extensively in the
Of
program.
course.
And I'm looking forward to bringing that to our synergy audience as well.
Because it's on the rise, regardless. It hasn't died at all. But domestic violence is an area that I stayed clear of. I'll say why. Aggression, that level of violence is something that I've not seen. Mm-hmm. So it hurts me to even see a slap on television sometimes, or any kind of violence.
Yeah.
But here I am at the forefront, helping this gentleman, Tayo, we call him, fondly, Tayo, and he has been such a passion behind the camera.
Yeah.
He's a filmmaker. So we wanna educate the public in terms of domestic violence, first of all, the overarching concept of it. And we wanna see what is happening in our society. And when we talk about in our society, Trinidad and Tobago, because he is also interviewed there. And this documentary is gonna be something that we really need for the public to have a look at.
Agreed.
So, but we also took it from the male's perspective because we wanted to show that, hey, there are men in our society that are being abused.
Yeah.
May not be physically in terms of beating and stabbing as women are, but verbal abuse, there's a level of dominance that women are having over men now.
When we talk about domestic violence, straight away we think of, like you say, abuse, lashing, hitting, beating, kicking, slapping. That's what we perceive in our mind. But abuse comes from so much more.
Exactly.
Talking down.
Manipulation is a big one.
Cussing, profanity, the way you speak to your spouse.
Yes.
Where your money? Where your paycheck? Taking control of every situation, and you are not allowing that person to be themselves, to be
The
their
level
own
of disrespect.
level of disrespect, talking down to them in front of family and friends, or even in general.
Yes.
That is all part of abuse and domestic
Of course.
violence.
And
we need to recognize that.
Definitely. And I deal with a lot of young persons, young adults, and I listen to the way they talk. And even in family get-togethers sometimes, or settings, or social gatherings, I would hear how they refer to each other.
Right.
If they are dating or so on.
Yeah.
And then they will go into the marriage, they will get married, and then the same level of disrespect continues. So they will sometimes come to me or call, whether, in what capacity, aunt or otherwise, or friend or family or counselor.
Yeah.
And they would say, she's talking to me like this, or he's talking to me like that. But we forgot that whilst the dating was happening, this was the same modus operandi.
Yeah.
This was what was happening. So when that level of respect isn't established initially, then how can it propagates?
I love that you've said that, because that is important. And I want to elaborate on that point. But first, I'd like to add, that is why it is important when you start dating and you recognize and you understand within yourself, well, I really like this one. I really like this person. And you see that relationship going to blossom into something that is more than just a boyfriend and a girlfriend, and you recognize this is wife material, this is husband material. You do your homework.
Even parents are having such challenges with their children and their young adults and their teenagers, and that disrespect starts there. But I always say, who is the parent?
Right.
Who is the parent?
Correct.
And we spoke at length about things like this. When the parents are on their WhatsApping and they're on the phone 24/7, how can you tell your child to come off your phone? So it starts somewhere. It
starts with the parent.
Exactly.
It starts with the individual. It starts with what they perhaps would have seen happen in their household, how the father would talk to the mother talk to the father, and that's what. So, which goes back to the point that you started, that in terms of recognizing, I don't appreciate the way you spoke to me. That wasn't very nice. And you have a conversation, you talk about it. But I want to elaborate on that, because that's important. Identifying signs that we need to fix.
Yes.
Get to the root of the problem and fix it before it explodes.
Domestic violence is about anybody. It doesn't have a face, it doesn't have a name, it doesn't have a look, it doesn't have a religion, it doesn't have a race, it doesn't have a profession. It can happen to anyone. We sometimes think that she looked for that, or he looked for that.
Or does what he chooses, let him live with it now.
That's right.
Yeah.
We have all these myths that we talk about in terms of, and why they can't leave. So we hear things like that. So we want to understand, first of all, that when we meet someone, and I'm taking you a little bit back to courting days, they look good. Yeah. What do? You fall in love.
Fall in love, helplessly.
And what is one common trend or thread I've heard with a lot of abused persons? The woman would call, in a lot of videos I saw and I heard from even others that I spoke with, they considered the guy a Romeo. So imagine you falling in love with your knight in shining armor. These signs are always there, you know. Sometimes we just ignore the signs. There's a abused woman that says, I became so addicted to the love that I didn't see the abuse. There are women who say, I'd never even recognized that I was being abused.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a word that was synonymous with themselves.
Right.
But the signs are, you know, they start off as Romeos. Then it goes into like the cycle of abuse. There's a tension. You feel like you're walking on eggshells. So we want to really touch on some of these signs this morning. You feel like you're walking on eggshells. There's the emotional part. There's the controlling part. There's isolation part. I'm taking you away. Sometimes they move even from around friends and family. They make issues with your girlfriends or your boyfriends, you know, friends. They make issues with your family. So now you become quite isolated. Mm-hmm. Then you start to depend on them for support in different ways. Mm-hmm. Some of these abusers may even ask you to leave your job.
Yeah.
So now you're now even more dependent on them for whatever. They will hold back certain things from you. They will give you an allowance even sometimes you are working. So these are all the signs. And then every step of the way, a man or a woman is saying, nah, it's just how they are. Mm-hmm. It's just their personality. Yeah. They make excuses, and before you know it, years it's going by. There was one abused woman, an American woman. She said she was in a relationship for 12 years with an abuser.
Yeah.
So she knew he was an abuser after the first year. Every year she would ask him to get married. Mm-hmm. So where's your mental thought? You are asking this abuser every year to get married, because she felt that at some point, once they get married, what will happen? The abuse will stop. So we are seeing the signs inside of what is happening, and yet we ignore them. And for a lot of women out there who are probably looking on, a lot of men who are looking on, and they're asking themselves, am I in an abused relationship? Because as I said, people tend to think, that's not me. I am not describing abuse.
Yeah.
I want to go to a wedding. I want to go carnival. I want to go shopping, and I'm told you can't go.
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen quite like that sometimes. They don't say you can't go, you know. They say, well, I don't think we have money for that. The documentary that we're working on, and again I will say I'm so glad to be a part of that type of initiative.
Yeah.
Will highlight this. Will highlight from the professionals, highlight from the victims, highlight from the survivors, and we're hoping to highlight from the even abusers, because it's difficult to get persons to talk about why did I do this.
Well, it's very sensitive.
Of course.
It's a very, very sensitive matter to deal with. And even trying to understand and accept the fact, hey, I'm being abused, is a difficult thing for some people to even recognize.
But you know what we found significant though? Persons were willing to talk, Zelisa.
Yeah.
Persons are willing to talk. The persons who came forward, some of them, we even asked them if they would prefer to hide themselves, you know, change their voices and so on. Some persons said, no, I want to talk about this. I need to heal from this.
Just when we talk about domestic violence, we stand at the side and we observe, and we probably will make the statement, why they staying in that? Why he allowing her to treat and stay in that year after year after year? Or why is she allowing him to beat her mercilessly? Why she don't do something about it? Get out. You don't care about your children. You don't love your children, because that would be, for me, would be the first thing I would say. Because that mommy mode would come in and think, I don't want my children, I might take it, but I ain't allowing my children or child to be part of this. And that's the first thing. And we point fingers. And we say things. We have all these suggestions then.
Of course.
But do we put ourselves in the shoes of that man or that woman?
Yeah.
And do we say, do they have any money in their bank account? Do they have a place to go? Do they have some sort of education that they could go out there and get a job and help themselves take care and provide for their family? So we need to question these things and think about the other party before we judge.
Of course, there's the reality, of course. The reality is reality, you know, there's a home invested sometimes, there are children invested sometimes, There is bank accounts invested. There's assets invested. Sometimes people are in business together, that's invested. How do I just pick up myself one day and leave?
Walk away, because enough is enough.
Yeah. So that's the reality. The other thing is fear. Of course, there's an overarching objective that the fear is so tremendous that, and believe it or not, in the cycle of violence, I've found that at the center of that cycle of violence is denial. So I'm not being abused,
So you talk about denial, and this point comes to my head with regards to, and people in Trinidad make it as a joke, and they think, well, it's part of the culture, and that's being a whatever.
Yeah.
And when you talk about infidelity in a marriage, and that's also, you need to understand, that is abuse.
Right.
And that is violence against somebody's rights and as a person.
Of course. The thing about it is there is always a rebirth from we can rise from the ashes, and a bad marriage, you can have a good outcome, you can have a good end. It doesn't have to. We've seen it in many families where things have happened and they come through, but there must be certain components to it, which is like counseling.
So we've only got a couple minutes left, and I want you perhaps if we could quickly address solutions quickly, because I think that's
legislation. The law needs to change. We need to understand that it has to start from the law.
Yeah.
There must be a mandate, there must be stricter rules. We must understand that this thing is happening. Speaking about it, tell everybody. All the persons I've listened to, all the videos I've looked at, all the authorities that I've read, they all say one thing: tell everybody. We also have to understand the root cause analysis.
Listen,
we have to
I
understand.
love that you said that, because that's important.
Where's
you
it
love
coming
yourself
from?
to get help, but if you love your partner as well, you need to understand that something is not right and they need some help. And you can help by helping yourself. You're going to help them, because they're going to recognize I have a problem and I can fix it, because history will keep repeating itself.
And of course, we always need more shelters. So anybody who wants to donate a house, Zelisa, I'm saying this forever, feel free. Because you have workers, we have workers, we have persons
that's willing to help.
You know.
Here's reminding you that with God all things are possible. I am Zelisa Singh Urpani.